It's a long story, but it's a good take.
I always remember Nick talking about how you broke one of his timers during a practice round or something.
Evan, is this still
Right.
on?
Yeah, threw it on the wall or something.
Yeah, dude, I break all sorts of shit. I broke like probably 6 or 7 timers.
I didn't know you actually had a smartphone though. That's impressive.
Well, I needed to get to work through Uber, but
so out of necessity.
I could just had a drive too, but dude, I'm always
I don't think I've ever seen you with a smartphone.
Oh, I'm assuming y'all are fine with
Well,
I
yeah,
think it's
yeah.
fitting for you. Yeah, I think the flip phone's fitting for you.
yeah, no,
I feel like it just works for your personality and what you do. Like you don't have a need for one.
Cool.
Oh, yeah.
Can I borrow paper from someone?
Okay, I like took paper that was just on the table, so
Oh, sure.
and I'm like almost out, so.
Okay, let's see if we can make this 2 sheets.
Gosh.
Laundry theory.
Let me find.
Notice the order is
Promise you
17 off.
This sheet is used.
That one's
Oh,
not
my-
used, it's just crumpled.
Okay.
Oh, I'll use this one. Oh, we got 4. Perfect.
Alright. I might need to like borrow paper and wrap.
The one he sees out.
Oh, jeez. Hold on, let me start this round on tab. There we go. So now Beats can be happy.
Quit fooling yourself.
These can be happy to take them out to Korean barbecue.
True.
You're out. Wait, sorry, did someone else? I only have 3. Or did someone have these papers?
I think it got resolved. Nope, sorry. Good enough.
I'm good whenever you're out.
Alright, all the judges good.
Hold on. I gotta hit this play button.
Everyone good now? Part 1 is framework. The rule of the ballot is to evaluate the simulated consequence of the affirmative policy versus competing policy option to reduce material oppression. 1. The act deploys the state to learn scenario planning. Either politics is vast scenario analysis of politics is pedagogically valuable, enhances creativity, deconstructs bias, and teaches advocacy skills. That's bar model 16. Scenario analysis justifies current trends, alternative self features, make scenario analysis, people do decision makers, imagination, shared by existing mental models, and conquered by scenario, some individuals break out conventional ways of thinking, division, their ideas, and different from the present, participate in strategy for avoiding failure to continue anticipating understanding international affairs. 2. Ideal theory strips away particularities, making ethics inaccessible and epistemic excluded as Mills 05. Theorizing based on the natural framework that reflect the experience of the privileged global obscure realities, ignoring oppression, ignores the consequences of the strategy, molding individuals, not that they recognize people will be affected by social location, descriptive concepts arrived at misleading. Part 2 is the plan. Resolve. Public colleges and universities in the United States ought not restrict any constitutionally protected speech that criticizes the state of Israel. That's Block 16. The UC Regents released a set of principles that says assertions of anti-Zionism have no place at the university regions of wrong. This such statements should debate whether Jewish people should have in the state of Israel is legitimate questions to discuss. There's no uncontroversial question once he's going to be decided. They have no confidence of doing, especially in the university, whether Israel is attached to the individual state. Can't tell which talked about university, the order regions are not participate regions should know any time professors do so. There's no place for a political viewpoint on Israel as a nation state. University is the place where such matters should be discussed. And defining anti-Zionism as anti-Semitic chills on campus discourse that attempts to criticize Israel, support Palestine. That's Emin 16. The State Department's definition of anti-Semitism inclusively delegitimizing Israel. Those are political positions. Criticism of Israel and anti-Semitism definition will have a severe chilling effect on campus, and that is the explicit goal. Student activism for Palestinian rights will face investigation. Palestine documents hundreds of instances of obstruction of pro-Palestinian activism at colleges. Students have been suspended for demonstrating against the Israeli occupation. Now, part 3 is advantages. Advantage 1 is Islamophobia. I'll isolate 2 impacts. 8 points suppression of pro-Palestine moves on campus denies Palestinian students the ability to form solidarity. That's now down in Sears 11. One of the core political projects of neoliberalism on campus is the rollback freedom of expression, campus silence, and campaign against Palestine solidarity, allows for listening to attack on freedom of expression, equity, religiosity, conception, expertise, argument that the person who experiences systemic inequalities more clearly, as the case for Israeli policy and hard to make after the Palestine-led boycott, divestment sanctions campaign, pro-Israel advocacy have sought to shut down their opposed to their attempt to shut down any expression of Palestinian solidarity. Now, B point attempts to conflate anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism. These campaigns by pro-Israel groups that demean and marginalize Muslim American students. Solomon 16. The full Christian pro-Palestinian students being anti-Semitic across the colleges have been claimed by a right-wing hate group posted exclusive to the cost of individual faculty accusing of collaboration with jihad, posters featuring the slogan hashtag Jew hatred horrors organizations turned to hate group by the son of poverty, lost after a driving force of the anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant movements. The posters created atmosphere of right-wing Israel advocates have compiled thousands of students and faculty that sees anti-Israel and anti-Semitic complaining too. And Islamophobia, empirical list hate crimes, fractures community, increasing national security, that's 4 on 16. A new report suggests that political right-wing political fueling hate crimes, anti-Muslim hate crimes, rose sharply in 2015. Trump's anti-Muslim backlash contributed to this backlash. Now, advantage to his civic engagement. Public university authority cuts the funding in order to respond to pro-Palestine divestment strategies, empirically proven on University of California campuses where organizations that don't associate with pro-Palestine get funding while others don't. Fremont 15. UCLA put stipulations of funding for student groups based on affiliation with Palestinian rights. GSA has zero engagement policy towards divestment from Israel and awards a good $2,000 in funding based on their zero connection to this. Conditions also apply to students with Just Palestine as well as graduate student organizations that support the Palestinian-led boycott divestment sanctions movement. Just Suit government says 7 out of 9 UC campuses have passed resolutions calling for the administration to pull investments or companies profiting from Israel's violation. And encouraging discourse about foreign policy toward Israel Palestine is uniquely good because it builds coalitions across all racial groups, inspiring new dialogue. The actions over to other reform movements as Howard and Shaver 12. Supporters emphasize that BDS response that they can take over to the lack of power by reaching out to a broad coalition of minority groups like campus to engage Muslim Jews, Latinos, African Americans. Supporters sought to build a force for change or other Jewish groups to join forces with the evangelical Christians, Orthodox Jewish students, and the Berkeley College Republicans. The power of BDS was indicated inside the crowd, defending their willingness to endure all-night sessions as well as the extended involvement of the Israeli consul and relatively unremarkable student government decision became the subject of national attention. The public discourse received contributed to a momentum that spilled over to other campuses. Now, concourse theory. 1. Use reasonability on neg T in terms of bright lines of actually together predicted this app, and there are 7 minutes of link terms in AT. I am fair. Contradictory definitions of any means neg can always read T on this topic. The neg can always call for more or less specification depending on the 1 AC app. It is still topic discussion because neg are incentivized always let the case debate with T and use time because 1 hour is always forced to restart. 2. All theory arguments have an implicit afflex standard. The most recent theories of late Elam Rouse show Hughes neg side bias. Adler 15. And late Elam Rouse neg 61%. 3. Vote amplify when a counter term 8 points. Afflex negative ability to win on either layer, so the app needs the same ability in the 2AR. 2AR is too short to win. You shall amplify defense against the 2NR theory argument, so the app needs reciprocal layers rather than adding more unreciprocal app needs. That's not a problem. Belong 2NR. 3 points reciprocity only. The neg can be T because the app is a birth from top, thus the app needs an RBI to compensate for the neg's unique app needs to the about. 4. App theories drop the bay of no RBI competing in terms of 4-minute 1 hour does not have time to win both theory and substance, so you must be punished. It's also key to deterring abusive entities from spreading out the 1 AR paradigm issues or the 2 and from overwhelming to 2A on the line by line. 5. Evaluate app theory prior to neg theory. The 8 point is that neg can win their show and beat back mine that belong to 2 was. It's impossible for me with both layers of 2A. That's only half as long as the B point. If the app speaks to the dark of the answer but can adapt to mirror the 1AC and avoid theory altogether. Preferred structural way about app versus neg. This applies to everyone, so it's most likely to establish community norms. Now part 5 is a method. 1. Use epistemic modesty to evaluate the method-based key decision making. Also extends to use probability times magnitude to evaluate versus definition game theory. Instances do that here as well. 2. Contesting the policy focus on the AC's back prefer the AC framework as well as theoretically legitimate. 8 point move 6 minutes of AC offense is uploads my offense which destroys that ground. B point also means never has to clash and engage with the app, which means they get superficial education. C point co-ops all their offense. They can be the world about what they're at. Now 3. The narrative of no progress is effectively appealing but historically imprecise political access proves we're not 15. At keystroke components, the serial way racial pressure gets in support a large scale demographic the political shift that will occur. Not only the Marshall Price movement, a whole range of social that we take for granted today from the Jim Crow era racial democracy as a big league compared to include information politics before civil rights including anti-racist movement, anti-apartheid, anti-colonial, demographic, economic, political culture shifts. They want to start a much bigger list. 4. Root cause explanations of politics don't exist. Methodological pluralism is key to open up new ideas and avoid bugs. Like 14. Because our ideas of difficult issues from genocide to war, only one position about critical scrutiny can have far-reaching consequences. Methodological pluralism less than hard critique. Also, back and forth between different methods trying to understand multiple perspectives. No single method can never adequately represent the bet, but each capture these does that the others cannot combine methods when they are deemed incredible. 5. We should focus on particular circumstances with best tackle material bias. Pop 16. In just events by concrete people start by point on how space stay right we must be there that doesn't matter that they said matter such a way that they want theory as the concrete are quality independent neutral respect. It can be diagnoses. What kind of diagnoses?
Ready?
Yep.
The Barma evidence about international relations. What about the AF is scenario planning in the context of IR?
I don't think that IR.
What about the AF is scenario planning in the context of IR?
The Barma 16 evidence is not uniquely good just because
That's not answering
IR.
the question. You're wrong about what you just said. What about the AF?
I disagree.
Anticipating and understanding international affairs. That's the
Okay, obviously, though, just because it says international affairs does not mean that the logic only applies to
I'm
international
curious
affairs.
as to what about the AF is IR.
Okay, so in terms of IR, there's probably impacts coming off of our civic engagement arguments as to
Okay.
why.
I'm a little confused. You read this, you're like, listen, scenario planning good, IR good. Then you read at the bottom this bleaker evidence that says, oh, one method bad, we should focus on a bunch. And then underneath that, actually screw the bunch, we should focus on particularity. All of these are conflicting.
I don't think that they conflict at all. Let's go through those line by line. First, the Papas evidence thing says that we should tackle particular instances of material violence.
But doesn't that foreclose other things that your bleaker evidence says are important methods, which is what?
Actually, I think Papas and Bleeker are perfectly consistent with each other. Papas actually builds off of the internal warrant of Bleeker, which says that you cannot address all social ills by attempting to ascribe one theory to all of them. So in light of that, we should.
Let's start on the case stuff. The vast majority of BDS movements are on private colleges because they have substantially more endowment. What does the app do to resolve the vast majority?
Okay, so obviously, so the Advantage 2 doesn't have like a necessary brink as to why, like saying why impact is triggered by US.
Not about a brink. My curiosity was almost all BDS movements are on private college campuses because they're the ones who have money to invest in Israel.
Okay,
like
sure.
Santa Cruz Community College isn't pouring billions of dollars into Israel.
Yeah, sure. So first, I think our Fremont 15 evidence indicates that there are public universities who have substantial investments in.
It's just the UCs. The vast majority of movements are elsewhere. Why do you solve
even if like you went private universities as like some kind of like minor solvency deficit, that's not a reason as to why the app is a bad idea. Also, our Howard and Sherwood 12 evidence is an indication as to why even doing our public colleges alone leads to spillover to other campuses.
Where's the warrant to spill over to other campuses?
Okay, sure. So, a relatively unremarkable student government decision became the subject of national attention. The public discourse received contributed to a momentum that spilled over onto other campuses.
The next line of that sentence says, and other California BDS initiatives.
Okay, now you need reason as to why it can't spill over nationally.
The card is just talking more.
Also, like, there's other warrants in here about how it got national media attention. So,
I'm curious about this card as well. It's tagged like causes like coalitions. It references a single BDS movement that reached out to other student groups on campus. What does that mean that a feature of BDS is like causing coalitions?
I think that impacts the consequence of BDS, not a necessary part of it.
Okay, it'll be 2 case.
Cool. We're on case.
It'll be just a case top down.
Okay. Oh my god. Give me a second. Word is not cooperating. Sorry, my web crashed, so I need to reopen stuff.
All good. On case, it'll start on the, it'll be like an overview. You can flow that next to either like roll the ballot or the like framework, like arguments at the bottom.
At the bottom.
Yeah, so I have it flowed like move 6 minutes when you see flash, that stuff. Flow there or at the top.
Okay, I'm good.
Good.
Yep.
The goddamn universe makes a meaningful percent possible. No such thing speaking out when the account is controlled by money. A strategy mayor of 14 privilege are and there are also
Clear.
Explicit physical capacity, faculty, increase of private university, cultures to bear massive density, transform the active culture, the university, work for the improvisation of this culture. We also see speaking these with the academy exposure, the student harassed today, focus on speech, abstracts, material balance of class. The app fails to correctly situate speech and design is with the correct economic context. They are 11 publishing seeking new avenues for capitalism all make activities strong the executive acceptance the girl left video with backlash you had the usual supporting BDS and really view that the university of the neighborhood we should talk about it doesn't have to be speaking of political visa rappers not going to get their contribution from the notion of our species to speak out the speech after notion back to these consistent BDS perpetuates neoliberalism diverts resistance from the most meaningful politics a political waste to reject science the app uses boycott to 94 politics that does more harm than good any awareness raised directly trades off with effective politics Des Simon 14 BDS way many of the things that suggest me that reform sports are really it's not the image conflict unfortunately support about saying so about having my thinking policy for constitutional solidarity with the universe for super liberal it's ideological fascism is really part of the cultural psychological policy those policy based on the liberalism the left systems of the internal politics and Israel history opposition to Israel military are roots where constitutional cultural boycott on their police message you learning about the autocratic society and cap is the root cause of Palestinian oppression focus on Zionism through BDS occurs obscure solutions to the conflict IPS 80. The problem that can only solve the considered socialist anti-Zionism is really looking at anxiety class conflict and Palestinian social management will be only because the Soviet driven refugee camps. The real problem's name is not Zionism but capitalism. The familiar slogan anti-Zionism anti-Semitism is to be rejected anti-Zionism instead of revolutionary opposition whole unjust socialism means resist racism and our critique independently outweighs the case neoliberalism causes extinction of massive social qualities. The app singleistic legalistic solution is the kind of politics neoliberal wants us to engage in so the root cause goes unquestioned for about 15. Ecological and economic crisis, military being transported, political challenging, fundamental capital symptoms, related to 6 Massachusetts capital, has a responsibility policy, economic policy, so the rest of the constitutional capital, the people of Turkey, like corporate school, the city, transport, gross nature, rich, just be a job, election, promising, a different management, the critical tasks, the military policy, the system with constructive, capacity, such political challenge for systems and fundamentals, the alternatives, the relentless class-based politics, it works against the university's economic opportunities, only engaging, they focus on economic forces. Playing public universities can be resolved capitalism of bar 14. No matter how radical scholarship is we fail to dismantle the industrial compensated for interest the only part of the board of knowledge is party production can be called to abolition economic business push by attacking illustration and actually be rather the university corporation university the academic issue corporation of the sustaining for the RTD global release and Mr. Trump's artificial universities and class struggle is key to solve Israeli-Palestine conflict more 19. If the U.S. capitalism and imperialist relations and capitalist relative policy about the Senate security the capitalist relations this state of machinery both sides of the capitalist progressive getting better culture class represented realization of African politics just for something Palestinian is really unified national force and national imperialist politics towards the master to see better the core of their financial system. That's all. Trump has accidentally kickstarted the stalled peace process. Now is key. Booth 210. Trump awarded Israel building more than 2 senators not for pieces. Administration supports past the worker peace after the first meeting probably with the press was when after years of feuding the Trump city went to explore the possibilities of peace back Trump question that national settlements were not national peace and BDS makes peace settlements less likely. Palestinian leaders opposed it. Dershowitz 13 BDS making her for Israel Palestinian reasonable solution. The Palestinian authorities coming out against boycott Israel leaders BDS versus BDS leaders exploit the confusion law retired professors in peace process failure goes nuclear Nashua 9. The conflict in Israel and Palestine is becoming an extremely interesting, only described as a ticking nuclear bomb. There is a new conflict on the necessity of impact of the Palestinians really complicated, and peace of non-conflict governments, bills being presented, economic governments, and through bills, maybe soon follow case.
The framing stuff.
The counter role of the ballot is we're able to contest the acts of scholarships as long as we do so with a point arguments that turn the case before it that there may be points arguments that are sort of why you have a stable advocacy solves 99% of these means no shift or are still able to engage and clash the offense that we're able to read them against new apps, which is key to check small apps that are really hard to get to with your sort of genetic experiment to the ability to sort of criticize representations. You say mood 6 people want to see no, you can read things like liberalism good or capitalism bad, all of which is responsive. You say a classroom that was into but also a classroom where you still make arguments which was sort of answer last you say switch side results or offense is not sort of necessarily sort of critical. It's theoretical piece of switch side is irrelevant. The top of the case. Their role, the ballot is self-serving and arbitrary. Ours is substantial. Our form of evidence factors the sort of questions of policy consequences. It indicates that a focus solely on policy is exactly what the capitalist wants to do, sort of to stop a massive challenges to the capitalist system, sort of engage in instrumental politics. The Obama evidence is the Obama evidence is not in opposite to capitalism. We also engage in international relations. The political evidence also impact turns and any of their sort of role-playing arguments because it's sort of methodological. So we meet the particularities in history evidence. Specific to BDS now, the terms BDS is a destructive movement. All countries all finish balance conflict. Goal 15. This is Palestinian BDS as well. Palestinian BDS as well. You know, we're making this is not severe compromise because there are a bunch of companies that don't go through the vision to make it feel like it values issues and help these people religion all cause multiple checks on BDS already. Messi 16 the you were sleeping in Russia this is 972 legislation counter there and rebel the one is your job is not the legal one to continue to companies is really good. As for administration act, not something equal card regulations, got the card regulations, and a lack of broad student support makes BDS counterproductive. It will harm Palestinians. Jerusalem post 14 adjustments that the BDS could harm Palestinians because the right of return has to be the point about laying a more understanding there is was that in the case of South Africa, the sort of the framing issues that most of BDS is that a private college which means a risk of any opportunity to contemplate sufficient outweigh these sort of massive missing sort of
Alright, why did you get late?
Just the last version was started.
Okay. And you cut one card.
I cut Messi.
Alright, I did that one. Everything else?
Everything else was right.
Cool. Alright. That's the alternative.
Unconditional.
Okay. What is a relentless class-based politics?
Our argument is we should sort of abandon movements like BDS that sort of focus on individual identity groups and instead engage in a sort of critique of the capitalist system broadly that starts from a place of class. The O'Hara card sort of outlines sort of specific demands we would make. So things like, divestment from universities, divestment from military industrial complex, challenges to militarism within universities, asking to decorporatize universities, etc.
All right, can they all do the app?
It is not a voting test, no.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about the IPS 80 evidence. We say that we somehow make the claim that CAP is the root cause of Palestinian oppression. What is the actual warrant saying that like CAP is what controls Palestinian oppression?
So the argument in the evidence is, quote, Palestinians, a class socially manageable because so many numbers have been driven out of refugee camps. The problem's name is not Zionism, capitalism, the familiar slogan, blah, blah, blah. In this sense, rather than understood as opposition to the unjust system as a whole, it means resistance to racism.
Okay, that's fine.
The argument is that the sort of reasoning behind why Palestinians are oppressed is not because of a racial division, is instead because they are forced out of homes, forced away from property, and into refugee camps, which is sort of the zero point of why they're oppressed.
All right. Let's talk about the disad. The Booth evidence, all it says is that Trump has like said some things about the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. Where do you show that like Netanyahu or the PLO are going to listen to what Trump has to say?
Our argument is actually, it's like pretty good. The argument is, I'll read it line from the card. The first meeting with the U.S. president, a way to reset relations after years of feuding. Trump has said in that massive reset meeting, he will bring up this talk and is very optimistic that he will get it.
Where? Okay, it just says that they think this meeting should have gone good. What line of this card says exactly what you just said?
I literally just read one to you.
Okay.
You're like, listen, it's like vague.
Okay.
The card says, Trump had a meeting to reset Palestinian relations. And then from here on out, he wants to pursue peace talks actively.
All right, Evan. The Nawash 9 evidence Israel and Palestine have not been able to there have been multiple attempts at peace process before. Why have they not gone nuclear now?
So the argument is, it's sort of, I think the last little line in the card is very clear. If peace is not found, governments of the Middle East may be overthrown if an uprising erupts in the Middle East.
Yeah, that's from 2009. The Arab Springs happened. Now let's talk about the.
Yeah, you're gonna be like, oh, Arab Spring good.
No, but like.
Was Israel and Palestine
Okay,
overthrown
Evan,
the
can I
Arab
ask a
Spring?
question?
No, sick. Go ahead.
Oh God. All right. Wrong drop. What's the exact counter rule of the ballot text?
The role of the ballot is to be a critical educator, or as long as the text of the alternative, the neg has a specific alternative text and reads turns case arguments.
Okay. Who engages in relentless class-based?
Sorry?
Who engages in relentless class-based?
So, I mean, that's not really how case work. Argument isn't that we fiat that an actor does something. Argument is that it is sort of a better educational model to take, i.e. you wouldn't be like, who endorses Kantian ethics? We would say it's just like a better like ethical stance, similarly to something about the alternative.
Okay. Stop prep. 38 seconds left. Okay. Order will be new off, then the case critique this ad. I am emailing it out right now. All right, is everybody ready?
Case K just said.
Yep. Everyone go. All right. New op interpretation. If they debate a region roles about alternative challenging capitalism, or neoliberalism, they must specify what alternative capitalism they advocate to. Clarify is insufficient to simply endorse challenging capitalism. B is a violation of the alternative sex to engage in a relentless class-based politics. So you clearly by C stands one stress. You know alternative makes the impact the alternative debate impossible system. Comparing captain non-existent system by critique socialism. You can look out and say you don't defend that argument. I don't defend captain rejection. Etc. Key affairs to dealing with all my opposite value. Defend the this term to critique. 8 point shuts off advocacy. Captain nobody knows what is suspecting music compare system in a way. Rebuttal to revolt warrior search you means revolution possible. B point stress you prevents discussion of the critical armies who dealing all my chest. I know said engage with the old and how we deal with capitalism. C point turns off the element capital has one part of dealing with the work class back in the capital norm. We must discuss the ability to turn and apartment whose lack of establishment to read from suppression. And the D point conclusion announced about why capital's bad norm and badness assumes a comparison between two worlds from worse than the other things we can't evaluate the which is specify alternative now. But operators because you can't evaluate arguments that the runners unfairly skewed now. Except a spike from the 1AC which says that one of our theories from resilience to drop the debater and competing interpretations and no RBIs. You can clearly see this in the 1 and C. Now the case. On the third, you say that counter roll the balance to contest the affirmative scholarship. You say that this turn case, but you say this turn case by first extent the bottom 16 evidence that the methodology of the affirmative uses is still somewhat good. Even if our scholarship is somewhat flawed, the scenario analysis that the affirmative engages is somewhat good because we are able to break out the cognitive biases that are present in our scholarship, which means that the bottom 16 evidence is a functionally a turn against their counter roll of the ballot. Now the second our roll of the ballot outweighs on magnitude, i.e. structural bias is real impact that occur outside of round whereas question the scholarship of the when he only has impact within round. Now the case solvency debate. First, you say that BDS destroys protests and leads to more harassment. This is a non-unique harm. The conceded bench one indicates that there's tons of hate crime already existing within the status quo, which means that it's just a question of better solvency, and the only affirmative has a risk of solving for the Islamophobia. And now you say that there's multiple checks on BDS, but the question of scalar solvency. There are always some campuses that have not implemented BDS or not endorsed pro-Palestine movements that are actively seeking to suppress Palestinian solidarity, which means that even if there are a couple universities that are checking BDS right now, it's key that we get the rest. Now you say that there's a harm Palestinians scared Jerusalem post evidence, but our evidence uses harm Palestinians, but our evidence empirically denies, and that there's actually broad-based support for BDS movements. Our pre-mod 15 evidence indicates that there most campuses would already pass divestment resolutions, and our evidence indicates that there are hundreds of instances of obstruction, which indicates that the local support is there. Now the key. First, the impact level. First turn to capitalism is good. The world is empirically rapidly improving by capitalism root cause. Heat 13. Humanity is doing better than ever has. Almost all empowered mattress conditions improve after back. Take more. Since at the end of the Cold War, there were fear about this. In the first decade, they went to today. Testing the Second World War instead of fighting. We now trade. Really healthy and long lives all around. Thanks to measure everybody expectancy, great child mortality, nutrition, education, gender equality, even climate change, have a better balance of pay, global warming, environment, vegetable all balance of the world. This multiple impact that weighs 8 point impacts that way after taking into account every factor which predictive evidence can also post-state their impact evidence and with the turn out reversely also measures material bias majority only about the factor of pressure is only bad to cause material bias individuals. Otherwise, victims of chemical today literally are material effective. Skip the next card. Next on is part 1 capitalism, sustainable regulation, self-less environment, plus flagship 09. Capitalism, environment, why must be met together. Capitalism, sustainable every single term of the past agree. The capital dysfunction without destroying the natural world. Environmental sustainable destruction in the area where we're mothers and environmental concern on life. Even in a recession, kind of recession now. All the alternative permutation do both the net benefit is the impact as well as the solvency, the affirmative. Now the dissat. Uniqueness overwhelms the dissat. There are tons of other BDS movements besides public colleges and universities to endorse, which means that they should be sufficient to trigger the impact. Second is not unique. There are tons of other BDS movements besides public colleges and universities that occur outside. Third, now the impact level. The impact is empirically denied. The empirically denied police process between Israel and Palestine have failed tons of times before, and also the internal link to the impact is also empirically denied. You say that Middle Eastern states will be overthrown, but not clarify as to why they will overthrow. Also, the Arab Spring happened, and tons of Middle Eastern states toppled without nuclear war starting. Did you get what I didn't read? Because I think that's severing out of what the 1C original was.
What was the 1C original?
An endorsement of only engagement of class-based politics or something like that.
Wait, why is that severance?
Because you now, or at best, then that's intrinsicness. You were adding on to something that wasn't there originally in the
Wait, you asked me to spec, and then you're like, but if you do, it's intrinsic.
Well, this would have been resolved. You just done it in the 1 and C.
Wait, why is it different? All your offense is like, I don't get turns and stuff. Why could you not have asked and not have to deal
deal with? Like, what is the impact of severance in that instance?
I think.
You're whining.
Okay,
You're like, listen,
intrinsicness,
I can't get turns if you don't specify. But if you do specify, I'm whining because I do get turns? I don't understand.
No, the argument is that this should have been in the 1 NC to begin with.
Why
so
is
we
it
don't have to
in
deal
the
with the
1NC?
impact of either intrinsicness or the harm to my shell.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, it'll be the shell, starting with a counter interp, then their interp, then the critique.
After shell, what was it?
Critique.
Sorry, I
It would be the shell, the case.
okay, sorry, I just couldn't hear you on my
That's all good.
All right, theory critique, right?
Sorry?
Theory critique.
Theory case. That we're good?
Yep.
Counterinterpretation, the negatives not to specify what comes after capitalism unless they are asked in cross-text to solve all of their offense because they can just ask you, they will say that, there will still no correct structure. There's absolutely no impact to the separate or intrinsic. If their complaint is that they would not be able to generate offense, we allow them to generate offense, which means separate would be good in that particular instance, solves 100% of their offense because they still sort of get they still sort of get the ability to read all the things where read all of these things that they will see that I can waste prep time or something like that. But there are 80% of people reading the alternative text at the very last end of the speech means that they have more or less have to ask how to concentrate. We also confusion over what exactly the alternative means. That would still require people to ask about anyway. The net benefit is limited. So specifying in the text of the one at C means that it is not negotiable and justifies any number of other different alternatives. I.e., it could be socialism or it could be any sort of historical materials or any other number of alternatives, which is more likely to kill a decide than anything else. Whereas asking process means you could get me to specify something else which would be let you get your dissents always all rockets, because even if it is true that specifying is hard, you're still able to get generics. Whereas generics, like for example, like cap could generally like you rag. Whereas if there's a sort of an overlimited number of different things you're not able to treat generics against those specific problems, which means it outweighs you. Now the original half shell you let's say for straps you, all of this assumes that you were unable to sort of read any sort of offense. You can still read generic cap good things that you read, which would solve 100% of your offense, which is no real strats to you. You say that specking stops us from being able to sort of engage in those types of things. This is nonsense, or I guess like the A1 in there is not shutting off accuracy is nonsense because we're still able to have sort of specific discussions over these things, which there's no sort of very specification is key. You say you're going to go sort of engage with things, but if we're able to engage with the alternative, i.e. things like it's been disclosed or it is a sort of a common alternative, all these things would just be able to engage with you. Chose not to necessarily strats you press discussion. Well, that was answered above. It's the same argument as the strats you can read generics or disclosure would solve. You say in terms of solvency, no. All of our alternative indicates that we need a sort of a starting point of class consciousness that only then can we sort of diagnose the problem. But I'll read evidence on that on the case. That's you say precludes your analysis about why cap is bad. No argument is that capitalism can be bad independent of any sort of our analysis can be that cap is bad independent of any sort of alternative because we read impact evidence. It is not tailored to the alternative. We do not say cap is bad because it is not socialism. We say cap is bad because it does terrible things to people, which means getting the link to the alternative stuff is not crucial to any of that. The critique. All of the links to the critique are conceded. The only thing you want here goes for is impact terms for Windows. But first, the sort of conceded link story. You have conceded that right now the sort of neoliberal university sections off what is or is not considered legitimate in terms of scholarship, which means things like a proper BDS moves or well organization would always be excluded from the university, which is criminal defense to the case because no one cares about the kind of writing it is. Instead, just sort of aimless college students make sort of aimless demands without sort of the kind of activism. There's a line in that first evidence that I think is pretty good, which is a direct intrusive engagement that indicates that dissemination of those types of information kills any sort of ability because it commodifies the kind of civic engagement in order to sort of just function under what the capitalist system wants. The narrative is succeeded indicates that in the context of the BS, we focus on speech is bad because it diverts attention from these sort of real issues and it's sort of entrenched them in a neoliberal kind of understanding of how speech works. The desmode evidence is also conceded. It is a direct link to the BDS movement. into considering sort of a neoliberalist idea because it trades off with the ability to make structural gains and instead of just the logic of boycotting does not ever make any gains on capitalism, but also doesn't make any gains on resolving any of the problems they describe in the 1AC, the impact debate. First, they say that a capitalist good. The 1AR is a late night infomercial for neoliberals, and it slices and dices, reduces poverty, and solves war. But like the garbage products marketed to sleep-deprived late night viewers, these claims are a sham. Every alleged problem that it solves poverty, environmental destruction, war were created by the drive for-profit to the neoliberal. The affect is based, sound persuasive, and it's theoretically constructed by for someone for some provision for the user views with sufficient. Any argument over why more of the same thinking will remedy the current crisis. The far evidence says capitalism's expansion requires crisis. The failure is built into the structure of neoliberals because you can't sell green products until you have the crisis. You should project their impact against for three more reasons. A, they're created by capitalists who want to preserve their own power and let money get from capitalist universities. And so two, essays address knowledge production when some machine to solve the particular universal knowledge production is level like the capital is all reinforcing universities on corporate money. The prediction stuff that was sort of referenced above about how we don't know what the alternatives will be impact our demand for clear predictions and short-term results is a joke in the context of sort of economic systems of capital. Rosenberg and Curtin 13 discipline economic system probably capabilities of economics actually record of actually populist demands for false evidence limits for science economics system reality people persistently change and destroying ways no social scientists could really anticipate the implications we destroy their the social constructive effects of choices with economics deals with the with the alternative debate is the only argument I have is a permutation. There's no net benefit. You conceded the cap is the root cause of the Palestinian question because it is their divulsion from property land and cause those things not a sort of racist thing, which means there's the alternative sufficient solve the case. It is sort of class-based critique that undermines capitalism, which is able to resolve it. All of the alternatives solve conceded. We solve cases, no net benefit. All of the links are disaster permutation. The last argument is that class struggle is sort of key. I actually need to put that. There's no reason to go with permutation if we solve the case. There's at least sort of 30 seconds.
Right. Overview of the shop. All right, is everybody ready? Yeah. All right. Here's the overview round. First, these competing paradigm issues extend the spike again. That the one AR theory drops with very competing interpretations and no RBIs. The competing interpretations means that if I win any risk of link on the one AR shell, that means that you vote affirmative on jump the debater. Now, the second thing on the overview that you should allow you to weigh against the counter interpretation plank. The 2.2 reason 2 orange by 8 points that the counter plank was completely unpredictable. I had no way that this was going to be his response to theory, which means that you should, and this was new in the 2N, which means that you at least give me a chance to respond in the 2AB points that is necessary to resolve lack of 2N weighing. I.e., if the 2A is not going to be responsive, then it's literally completely unresponsive, which means that it's hard for you to resolve the counter debate. Now, there is that my strategy standard outweighs your limit standard. This first strategy that solves the entire limits argument. I.e., you say that your limits argument says that your counter will allow the negative to read the alternative and the affirmative to engage that, but our strategy standard argues that this is fundamentally flawed and that our interpretation also solves for the entirety of the impact, which means that there's no unique reason why you vote on his limits that benefit. Now the line and counter. First you say that all the counter on the point that says that about asking ACX first it's empirically proven that critique debaters are super shifty in cross-examination, i.e. they'll pontificate as to what their alternative actually says is actually proven in this route. I never got a clear answer as to what engagement, rigorous class engagement actually means. Second is that you should reject intrinsicness anyway because it adds things onto the critique and makes them functionally a moving target, and it's still net better if the alternative is net right at the end of the round. Third is that judging this is the counter judge paradigm, i.e. some judges don't vote, don't think cross-sex is binding, or that they just don't flow cross-sex. Fourth is that the text is written down text in the one is more verifiable than the speech which you can actually check after round one, whereas you cannot check cross-sex unless you're reporting it. Now the limits argument. First, just because I asked you to read something doesn't mean that you necessarily have to comply with it. Your interpretation doesn't say that you have to agree to what I asked you, which means that there's no unique offense to your net benefit. Second is that this should have been in the one to begin with 8 points. Net benefit because the allows the affirmative prep along a B point. It ensures that there's no shady intrinsicness regarding the additional things to the alternative. And also you say that I could just be generically like I did in this round. The problem is that means that you 8 point. You could just front like those generics every single time and win. When the case debate apparently proven this round, you had a really long answer to my cap good impact turn. Key point is that this gives you a 2-to-1 advantage. Either you can win on the generic debate or on the alternative soft debate, whereas I can only go for the generic debate, which means that you have more ways to access the battle than I do. Now, on my interpretation, except the interpretation that they must spec the alternative into all the reasons as to why I answered the counter interpretation, playing a reason as to why the interpretation is not better than the counter interpretation. Now, the Stratsky argument, do you say that this assumes you don't do a really good job? You don't do a good job handling all my analysis of the counter interpretation crosswise here, and the lack of specification in the one to see about what the alternative actually does means that I'm unable to engage in. You can only make generic arguments which one they to me and find as to what the value of what our strategy is going to be.
We don't want to do that now. I think maybe.
I always just shoot for this for now. Alright, these are gonna have to get.
Actually, never mind.
You decided?
Hmm?
Did you submit one?
I am not. Yeah, I'm so excited.
Alright, I have a little, just double check. Before I submit.
I don't have it from patrons because they'd already written out the thing, so I'll just because we're gonna get a refund from them. Actually, it's all right. Later. I'll see you on Friday.
How are you doing?
Better than see you in like 4 days, but later.
Thanks, Scott. I'm coming Thursday night.
Oh, I also was walking away without giving this. We're coming Thursday night. So we have to bring your coffee, so I'll bring the chips.
Oh, right.
And maybe some other products from the establishment.
You can hear us. Do y'all mind if I record the RFDs?
Not at all.
All right. Man. Congratulations to both debaters for making it to the final round of the Stanford Invitational. The decision is a 2-1 for the negative from Harvard-Westlake.
All right, I sat. I honestly don't know what they voted on. I spent the entire time. I was done before Michael was done. I didn't submit my ballot and kept going over and over and over the speeches up until Arden submitted his because I wanted to find something for you. What I ended up voting off of was the theory shell. For me, it seemed pretty clear that the offense off of the shell is that it's unclear exactly what the alt is. You need to specify what your alternative is to challenging capitalism. You're a moving target. The offense under your counterintuitive is very lacking. You have some responses to his argument. I can go through the list. You have no impact to severance or intrinsicness. That's defense. You answer his prep time waste argument with you could incentivize all the text at the end of the speech. That's the closest I get, maybe. But I don't really know why that's bad. It's not explained. Then you have limits. It justifies any number of different alts. It seems like you could read those anyways. Then Cross-X says, could have gotten me to spec in something else. He says, you don't have to agree to something that I asked you to spec in Cross-X. Also, just seems like you could change anyways. Then you say, specking is hard, but still they're generics like cat good. His response is that that's not the only argument I need. You can frontline it every time. It gives you 2-1 advantage anyways. Your next argument is that this all assumes that there's no evidence. This goes back to generic cat good. It solves 100% of your evidence. You just explained what I did in the 2AR. Then you say answers to why I'm not able to engage with you. You say shutting off the advocacy is nonsense. This is a defensive argument. If you say if unable to engage with the alt, that's not true because it's disclosed. It's a common alt you could have engaged. Sure, potentially you could have engaged. The argument, though, I don't see as a ground or like an engagement issue. I see it more of as it's hard for him to tell what the alt does. It can shift, it can change. Then you have this discourse, answer to his discourse argument. Oh, and also saying it's disclosed common alt center. That's a defensive argument, not a reason as to why you get offense on the theory layer. Now you have answers to the discourse argument. You say same argument as above, generics and disclosure solves. We address that. Then you say we need a starting point. Only then can we diagnose the problem. This is a reason as to why maybe like your alt doesn't have to have something after. That's probably the closest I can get you to, but that still doesn't address like the fact that his argument is like I don't have a clear understanding of what it is. I checked back to see Cross-X. I don't have that in your Cross-X. If anything, I have in your Cross-X that you give example, you explain your OPARA part about how there are different divestments, etc. But you know, I'm not going to do that work for you when you don't extend it like that in your 2NR. To me, I don't have this kind of divestment analysis. Now, I'm not going to give him the value to that because he doesn't point out that shift. But that also means that you don't get access to me at a starting point move on. Now, lastly, you have this argument, which I had trouble flowing because I didn't really understand what you're going for. But what I got was cap is bad, independent of any alt, so you can always read it no matter what. If we read socialism, and there's always like a link turn. Again, his arguments as to why the generics are not very good, about why he's not able to answer everything. You get generic insolvency, only get generic seems to answer that. So you do not have offense coming off your counter. You have Cross-X checks functionally is what your counter is. To me, that's what I understand it to be. I don't have a reason as to why not speccing is good or an IME as to why you do specify. I think you should have made an IME as to why you are specific because I do think you explain what your alt is more or less. I also do think that you know he should know what your alt is. It's fighting capitalism is pretty generic. But his argument is you can shift around blah blah blah. The second thing is I don't have a unique offense. I don't see anything like that. Now, if I go down the 2AR flow, the first thing he does is a big block on cross-ex checks. I mean, he goes through, it's proven in this round, I never got a clean engagement. I'm not going to go there because that requires me to evaluate whether or not I understood it. I don't want to intervene. But his second and third and fourth argument, he says it makes him a moving target. It also means some judges didn't vote or think cross-ex isn't binding or don't flow cross-ex. Also, text is more verifiable. I don't think these are new. I think they're responsive to your cross-ex, by the way. So I don't even bother with this. Do I get new arguments or not? I don't think that's relevant. Then he answers your limits. Again, I address this. He says that you don't have to agree with it. Then he also says it should have been in the 2NC. It's net better because we get better prep. Arguably, that's answered in your NR when you say incentivizes the alt text to be at the end of the speech. But presumably, like, if I'm to do the weighing there, presumably there's some net benefit. And it's also still like unclear as to why you get small advantage. The last part is, sorry, not the last part. Last part on the counter insure. We already went over that part. Okay, now, lastly is on his interp. He says last specificity in the NC means I can only make generic arts, screws with my one arrow strategy. I'm not really sure what you're saying. My strat skew arguments outweigh your limits arguments. And you say that the counter interp allows an entry alt. I can engage, but it's still going to be flawed. There's no unique reason for your net benefit. So functionally what I have at the end of the round is you saying that my alt you can check and cross-ex. The closest I can get is the closest I could find for a reason to vote for you on this is there was some argument in here about like I'm not going to find the exact word. So it's about why like we're going to ask in cross-ex anyways. The reason I'm not willing to pull the trigger on that is because again, his argument is still that you could shift. It's better to have the prep time and that like you don't have to answer and cross-ex or like change your speech or cross-ex. I think that the risk of you being sketchy and moving target, I think his analysis on his interpret why that outweighs any issue. Even if it goes to cross-ex anyways, it's net better if there's more isolation in the speech. I don't think it's a very high amount of offense. I don't think it's very hard to beat, but I do not think your counter interpret was very good because it was heavily reliant on cross-ex checks, which was dealt with at the top of the day. That's how I voted. Any questions?
I could go next. So I'll preface this by saying that it says in my paradigm that you need clearly, let's see, like a clear warrant for why I should evaluate theory through the traditional offense-defense way that I evaluate other positions in the debate. I think the claim that the theory respondent needs to have proactive reason for me to believe is that he hasn't done anything wrong. Not that his practice is like 100% legitimate or like not like even a little bit, you know what I mean? Like, I think that he just needs to prove that he didn't do anything wrong. If he proves that kind of his offense on the theory debate, absent the compelling reason that you give me in the theory show for why I should evaluate it differently, which I say in the theory. So
I would have like bought the argument, like the similar argument with like the 2-1 strats. Your argument, like, look, I was forced to recap good, and then you just read your
no, I'm about to get sorry. So I haven't started my. That was just like the overview.
Okay, yeah.
So the first thing is that so John said he didn't buy that argument, but I did. He says that K-debater, this is the exact word I have. K-debaters are really confusing. This is going to require asking me about it in cross-ex anyway, which means that a text is never sufficient to address the problem. Things will always get to cross-examination. So if there's a disadvantage to having to use cross-examination, that is something that your interpretation still leads to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I can see how John might think that the warrants that you give for why cross-ex is a bad thing to like maybe promote us, or sorry, to incentivize us to get to. So he did that cross-application, but he never said your Twitter. This takes out the place where Evan says that K-debaters are confused. So does that make sense? So
yeah.
I didn't evaluate that. The second thing is he says that you are saying that you only get generics to his critique, but that's his entire answer to your theory show. He says you still have generics to my critique, and then your Twitter is like, I only have generics to your critique. And it's like that was his response to your theory show is that you still have generics. So you need to explain why generics are not sufficient and why that is abuse or offense to a theory interpretation in the first place. You know what I mean? Like that's the whole point of debate is to limit your opponent's opportunity to answer an argument. That would be like I could always do the theory show if this was sufficient to have offense in the theory. I could always say, hey, I didn't have 5 answers, I only had 4, so you took 1 answer. Then the other thing is you don't respond to this offensive argument at the bottom of his counter interpretation that says that he's more likely to de-link disadvantages to his alternative if he's more specific about what his alternative is. I just don't hear an answer to that, so that's like a piece of offense that he has to his counter.
Okay.
Yeah, I voted very similarly. So I didn't say, yeah, so I guess there's sort of two questions. The first is whether or not the counter-interpretation solves the spec issue. I think you do a good job of proving that it doesn't, because you'll still be shifting in cross-sects like the judges don't necessarily flow cross-sects, and like the having a text in one NC makes it more verifiable. So I don't think the counter-interpretation solves your offense. I do think, though, that there's still offense to this counter-interpretation, and I think that offense is that defining a more specific alternative just narrows the ground that the affirmative can read against the alternative. Like, if you read the alternative of socialism, you can't. It severely limits the app's ability to respond to the alternative. Like, you can read fewer get-sets. And similarly, I don't think there was a real answer to that. Your answers to the limit argument were like answers to cross-sects check. You had one reason why asking does not necessarily mean compliance, and the reason why, or asking a cross-sects does not necessarily mean you'll get a good answer from him. And a reason why specking into NC is better. Neither of those arguments prove that it's worse if the negative narrows their ground. That it's better if the negative narrows what their alternative does. Your offense is this like Stratsky argument. I think there's a couple arguments that are like the one argument that's dropped. I think that's notable is this disclosure solves engagement argument.
Okay.
I think that enables you to read generics and cuts against this argument that he'll just frontline the generics. Your other response to the generics argument is that there's a 2-to-1 advantage because you can either go for alt solvency or generics. I don't understand this argument at all. Like, he has to win both cap good, cap bad, and alt solvency. It's not like either one can be, an independent reason to vote negative. I think you chose. I think the 2 and R made the wrong choice, both on how to respond to theory and which position to go for. I'm not sure why you didn't just go for the Trump DA. There were like 3 analytic responses, 2 of which were like impact defense, which should be pretty easy to deal with, and one was like an okay uniqueness overwhelms the link argument. That's, I guess, a side note. On theory, I think a much more effective way to respond to this type of argument is just impact turn it and show that like it's worse to sort of narrow down like movements against capitalism to sort of pre-specify an alternative. It's like makes us worse revolutionaries, and like there's a lot of evidence for why capitalism sort of forecloses our ability to know what the alternative to it might look like until we just sort of build movements and see where it goes from there. That's the sort of standard way that you would respond to vague alts if it was made as a substantive response on the critique. And I think you can apply a similar strategy here and just sort of make them, like, use the rule of the ballot debate on the app's framework to sort of impact those arguments. And I think you would have, that strategy would have been a lot more successful. And for the 2AR, I think that if you had explained your impacts in a lot more, like, given a better impact, like the overview, I think was like, I can make new arguments, like, of course, like, yeah. Like, I'm not going to say, oh, you responded to his counterinterpret, that's a new argument. I think that was like wasted time, and you should have just started with an impact review of like, what ground do you lose by not being able, by the negative being able to like have a vague alternative? How does this like fundamentally affect your strategy to answer the critique? Just explaining the impacts in more detail, and also answering this argument that it limits your ground, like the limits DA in a more substantive, direct way.
Okay.
Yeah, the allow new 2AR arguments would never be considered, because if the judge doesn't allow new 2AR arguments, they would ignore that argument.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm dead serious. Like, if the judge was that slow to begin with, they wouldn't have. It's not like they would evaluate these warrants, because what would they be evaluating relative?
Okay. All right. Yeah. Didn't think about that.
You can't try to do a line by line defense of new arguments good if there can't be line by line engagement.
Okay.
Nice.